I'm here with two great people, and I don't want to attempt to tell you who they are because I'll do injustice just by trying to focus on things that are not important to them and possibly leaving things that are very important to them. So earlier on when we had a conversation, I said, I want each one of you to just tell our audience, who are you? What are you passionate about? And why did you choose to be actually on this platform, this moment, to address this specific matter that we want to talk about? Thinking about life and leadership beyond the pandemic, both in church, in business, and in life. What can we anticipate? We are talking about the future. And sometimes, especially when you talk about a future that is volatile, that's ambiguous, that's, you don't know what to expect. How can you still be hopeful? So allow me, as they always say that ladies first, and then they say men before, but this time I'll go with ladies first. So Rina, if you could just talk to your audience and tell them about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Barine. But before even I introduce myself, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be on this amazing platform and to have this very important discussion. My name is Rina Hicks. I am an exhorter. That is who I am. Whether we are discussing God or finances, I am an exhorter. I'm a mom. I have 3 children. I am married, have been married for the last 13 and a half years. And professionally, I am a financial analyst. I'm an investment banker, certified professional coach, and an author. Yeah, I think one of the things that, that exhorting thing about me is when I learn something, I want everybody to know about it. And so, I find myself giving a lot of talks, and I have a YouTube channel, I have a training a platform where I teach people how to invest their money. But I, more importantly, help people invest that money. I spend 70% of my time advising companies on how to raise capital and advising people on where to invest their money. Yeah, that's me.
All right, let's give Lina a welcome applause. And what a better person to talk about investment. You know, one of the things that Dr. Kasambala here talked about is about investing. And right here we have an investment banker. The first time I came across that term, I had so many questions. Investment banker? Okay. All right, let's hear from Dr. Kasambala.
Well, I think I've been already introduced to the audience. Just a few things to say about myself and my family. I have a family. I have a wife. We've been married for 26 years this year, going into 27. So yeah, we are reaching those numbers. And then I have 2 lovely sons. Like I said, the firstborn is at the university, and then the second one is at the high school. There's 7 years difference between the 2. So we calculated the first one came after 5 years of our marriage. The second one came 7 years after the first one. And then we calculated by the time we have the third one will be too old, so we closed the factory. That was the end. Yeah, I'm very passionate about leadership. As I was saying, in my presentation, I have lived in different worlds, the world of academic, the world of ministry, church ministry, but also, the world of business. And I think, for me, what really pushes me is to make a small contribution to the leadership space. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give an applause to Dr. Kasambala as we welcome him. And I want to start with you, right on where you stopped. The pandemic came, and you received the news. I don't know where you are. When we listened to Dr. Muindi, she said she was far away, and then that's when the news struck that the pandemic was coming our way. I don't know where you are, but you can give us an experience, especially taking into account that you're a minister, business person. I mean, you carry everything along. And when Kingston was introduced, he said you even done a postgraduate diploma in neuroscience. So I thought, all right, this guy might study a little bit of my mind and think what I'm thinking. But how did it come to you, the news of the pandemic, and what was your response? Just put us into that space.
Well, I think, the starting point is to say all academic papers meant nothing when COVID hit. Well, I'll tell you something that I've not shared. For me, COVID hit me hard because I had a longtime friend, a Zimbabwean friend. Him and his wife, 2018, towards the end of 2018, December, during the school holidays, they decided to take a trip because he was hitting the 50s. They decided to take a trip, to Europe, just a holiday. His wife works for the UN at that time, and they had a nice holiday. They left their 3 sons in Zimbabwe, fortunately. On his way back, his wife went to the UN work where she was working, somewhere in North Africa, and then he decided to go through Dubai to get some parts for his business that he was involved in. On his way, he contracted COVID. And that was February 2019. We were very much in communication. When he arrived in Zimbabwe, I'm in South Africa. He said, look, I've arrived. I'm looking forward. This disease, he called it a disease, is not looking very well. We're worried about it. And then weeks after, he fell ill. It didn't take long. He was the second case, so-called case in Zimbabwe to die of COVID. His 3 sons could not bury him. His wife could not fly from North Africa to attend his burial. We couldn't go there. So for me, COVID hit home. Yeah.
Well, we apologize and sorry about that experience. I mean, it's a friend and a close friend, and that feeling of loss is real. But Trina, building up on that, leadership is about people and emotions. Dr. Sambala has shared with us an emotional story of how COVID came and affected him and relationships. Tell us about your experience with COVID and this whole pandemic, and which is a crisis that we are still in, and some parts of the world are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, sorry about your friend. Can I use it? I use this? Or I put it down? Okay. So in Kenya, COVID came in 2020. I remember it was in March. It was a Friday. I was at my desk. And I literally, as soon as I heard the news, I stood up and went to a wholesale shop in South B to stock up my house. I was so afraid. I was like, the world is coming to an end. And as I was there, because I work for an investment bank and a stockbroker, we trade in the Nairobi Securities Exchange, so I have to follow what's happening. And I remember watching stocks come down. And do you know that literally because of the huge drop in the stock market, that week and the following days, we actually had, in fact, it was that day, we had a market halt, and that's where the Nairobi Securities Exchange takes a call to freeze trading, because it's like, listen guys, take a breather, think and process about what has just happened, because there was panic selling. And over the next few days, I remember Safaricom as a stock, I don't know why I remember Safaricom in particular, came down from about 38 shillings to 23 shillings within a very short period of time. But anyway, so that was my world, because we as an industry are at the forefront of feeling everything that's happening in the economy. And so, it was very, very tough from that point of view. And then after that, sort of just processing ourselves and trying to figure out how are we going to cope in this season of crisis. Investors are disappearing, they want us to sell, staff are wondering what's going to happen, and it was just a season of a lot of confusion initially. Post that, it obviously did get a little worse over time, but we found ways of coping, and I think we'll get into those details as we go.
Yes, absolutely, but I have a very interesting question. So you receive the news on a Friday afternoon on your desk, and the first thing you think is the world is coming to an end, but you go and do stock out.
And I'm like, we probably need to get all the dry goods in the house in case we have to be in our houses forever. I guess we had seen what happened in Australia, with all the tissue paper story. I wasn't one of those, by the way. I bought beans and dengus. Anyway, we are an African audience, so I bought beans and all kinds of pulses, let me say, just to make sure that we are okay. You think in an instant when you hear shocking news, you go into a panic and you're not very rational in the way that you process the news sometimes. Yeah.
Interesting. Panic. Do you experience any of that, and were there any panic reactions in your case?
Apart from the emotional experience of losing a friend at that tender age, I think for me was a worry, especially for Africa. I mean, when we heard about COVID and then the way it was taking place, I have an aging mother, I have, family, and we are not in one place. So we are all scattered around the world, I should say. And then you wonder, are we going to see, each other? I've always said, hats off for those who invented WhatsApp. Hats off for those who invented YouTube and whatever, other platforms, really. Because without that, I think the world would have been very, very dark. So, yes, worried, panic. It happens, in our community. People started, stocking up, food. So you go to the store, there is literally, no food. There was panic everywhere, I should say.
Quite interesting. The other day, Kingston and I were in a conference, and the keynote speaker is a writer. So he said, for him, being an introvert, when they talked about lockdown, he was like, great, an opportunity for me to write more books. What did that mean for you, the lockdowns, and what was your reaction when that happened?
I think, for Kenya specifically, we didn't quite go through a lockdown that was around our neighborhood. Fortunately, you could move within Nairobi. I remember the challenge was moving from Nairobi to any other county and even out of the country. That was tough. But I think for us, because of having gotten systems, IT systems, which is what you were talking about before, several years earlier, we were able to easily transition from being in the office to working from home. Actually, it was a very seamless process. We literally, till today, their colleagues I've not seen, well, I see them once in a while, but they've not come into the office to work since that March 2020. And we literally just set them up in their homes in terms of getting the gadgets in place. And since then, they've been operating from their houses. And so we got we reduced the number of staff in the office, and we all worked from home, and it was fine. I even have a colleague who worked from Nyeri because he chose to move out of town to be able to do that. And so I'm so grateful that we had the technology and the ability to have meetings on Zoom, that we had been able to have some time to train on some of these platforms so that we're able to transition smoothly into that.
Well, thank you. Technology, and you talked about flexibility, because it's just not about technology. It was the flexibility of the leaders to accept the new norm and a new way of doing things, that I don't have to see you in office to know that you're working. Dr. Kasambala, from an organizational development perspective, which is your area of expertise, what does that mean for leaders moving forward? Especially those who are management, by seeing you there, by walking around, making sure you are seated on your desk. And now I can't see you on the desk. Speak into that.
It's a dragon that has really, up to now, it keeps on haunting a number of business executives who can't embrace the fact that the world has moved on. I mean, just alluding to what Rina, mentioned here, Kenya should be applauded for your IT systems. I don't know if you know that. I mean, in terms of innovation in the IT area, I mean, I follow these kind of things. Kenya is right advanced, because right on the streets, you have these street kids, who are putting, all these systems, together. You really need to cherish that. But like you say, maybe that is what really saved you. South Africa had a complete lockdown, where we had even soldiers, because, people wanted to have life, and they thought, this was just easy. The president had to instruct soldiers to be on the streets, just to prevent, the public from going, into the public. That's how scary, it was. So coming to the organization leaders, like I mentioned in my presentation, a number of leaders learned the hard way. But those who were able and flexible, they went into what I call private, executive coaching. So they will call you as an executive and say, please, can you coach me? But don't mention to my company that I'm going through, a coaching, experience. But I really give respect to SAT, because now they're managing, their companies well. But there are still those that are in denial. They want to see somebody clocking in from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock. No flexibility. I think those companies, you can see, they're really going going under.
Talking about those companies, what then do you think is the future, especially for Africa, where we know that internet connectivity and technology is still a challenge? How can leaders navigate? And I would want you to combine that question with your experience in church. With all due respect to the pastors here and everybody involved in church leadership, churches have been known to be very slow into responding. How do you react to such acclaim, having served as a minister yourself?
I think it's this world. Invest. We need to invest in these systems. It will not just going to happen. So on our budget, when we calculate or we make our budgets, make sure that no system is one of them. This thing, having things not to fail, there is no luxury for that. You are going to lag behind. Churches that are not on these platforms that we're talking about here are now history, some of them. Some of them exist just in their diaries. They no longer exist as far as the public, is concerned. So I think, for leaders, flexibility for me calls for leaders to say, well, what can we do better and where can we invest? So it's systems investment, but also it's people. Because, you as a leader, you can't operate all systems. So you need people who are experts in those areas. Send them to school, send them for a course. I think in doing that, you have sort of a return on investment, on your, either the church. I know there are no returns on investment, on churches, but in heaven, you have souls, coming to know Christ. But in business, you can be able to see the return on investment.
So investment in people, in systems. Where does processes come along the arena? Because people, you might have people and you have the tools, but how do you bring them to work together?
One of the things for us that happened when COVID struck is being an institution that is regulated, I should whisper as I say this, is there are certain systems, controls, manuals that you're supposed to have in place. But to a larger extent, some of those things, like say the business continuity planning document, sits in a cupboard, was done by a consultant, reads very nicely, but nobody in the office can remember anything it says, because it's not something that we typically have the habit of going through and reviewing. But when it happened, and it was like, oh my gosh, what happens now? What do we need to do? Is when you realize the importance of some of these things is putting in the systems in place that are so automatic that we just sort of continue with how we are running because there's a system. We know that this is the person that is in charge, this is how we run things, and it's documented. So we now have gone through a process of going back to look at what is our business continuity plan? What do we need to ensure that we put in place so that if something like this happens, it could be a war, it could be another disease. Now we've seen there's monkeypox. Fortunately, it's not in Africa as yet, although somehow it came from here is what they say. But anyway, is how will we react and what do we then need to do to ensure that the systems that we have put in place continue to run? Because when you have those systems and controls, then irrespective of whether you're at your desk or in another county, those systems continue to work. But we don't put systems in place just to sound nice and to comply with certain rules. I think it's about management. And if you just allow me, this whole story, including what you shared with us, Doctor, is how and the importance of good management. And it applies in every single sphere of our lives. If we are given resources, and we are given amazing resources by God, we must ensure that we are accountable, that we are disciplined, that we are diligent, that we do the best that we can and are efficient in the way that we manage those resources. And even if these things sound like they're just words up in the sky, it's part of being a good manager of the resources that God places in your hand. And the reason we don't progress and the reason we don't move from one level to another, whether there's a crisis or not, is because we haven't taken the time to be good managers of what has been placed in our hands. And so we must invest the time and the resources to learn, to improve our craft, to improve our businesses, to improve everything that has been given to us so that then we're able to manage effectively, efficiently, and succeed in where God has placed us.
Great contribution there. management or being good managers, and possibly for those who want to make it sound more biblical, good stewardship. So one and the same thing, that we know that we have been entrusted, it's not ours, and that we are responsible for ensuring maximum and optimal use of those resources. As we try and bring this to a close, I come over to you, and Rina has talked about a couple of things, but one thing that just caught my attention when she talked about it is that whole element of stewardship. And never mind that she mentioned that about monkeypox and that it came from Africa. No worry, all bad things come from Africa in many ways. But thinking about it, what would you say about stewardship? Are we good stewards ourselves?
Yeah.
And especially because you talked about environmental stewardship.
Yeah. I think this is a huge discussion. It's a question of how much time do we have. It speaks in a number of spheres. Like Rina has rightly pointed out, it's not only in the financial sector. Stewardship speaks into the political arena. Like I was saying, time has come for our political leaders to be held accountable. We need to put into politics people that are willing to be held accountable, that are not alarmed when the spotlight or the floodlights of exposure is on them. They start crying foul. I think that time is gone. Anybody who is going to stand on the platform of leadership should be willing to be exposed. I think that's how we are going to clean Africa. Because, I mean, we've been mourning. I mean, we have all, I mean, I was intrigued yesterday by a gentleman who said, in Africa, we don't lack resources, but what we lack is resourceful minds. We lack resourceful minds. So maybe time has come for us to challenge leadership. Those who are vying for leadership in politics, those who are vying for leadership in business, in the church, in families, wherever, to say, well, can you give us a contract that you're going to be responsible? Or how are we going to check and balance what you are doing? I think time has come. People may say, well, are we now beginning to be sort of like, spooky? It's not spooky. We have sacrificed a lot in the name of trust. And our trust have been betrayed. Every time I look at a leader messing up, forgive the word, messing up, I look at my children's future. It's not about me. I'm done. I'm part of the mess that has been caused. But for the sake of my children, I will see to it that a leader is accountable.
Accountability, a big word, and I don't think we have the time to unpack it here because we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean for the leaders to be accountable? But I think we need to also change the spotlight onto ourselves and say, what does it mean for me as a person to be accountable? Because before I demand accountability from someone else, I need to be able to demonstrate it. But coming over to you, Rina, as we bring this to a close, what has it meant for you, and what does it mean for many leaders who are watching and following this conversation, thinking of how do I bounce back? How do I start moving forward? How do I get myself into the next space? This future that I don't know about, it's volatile. I don't even know what to anticipate. What are some of the things you'd mention that I can take home and say, I can do this, practical things?
Okay. Because of what I do, allow me to take that question from just general leadership, specifically to finances, if that's fine. And so if you're looking to build financial resilience, to enable you to be able to bounce back from a setback, to be able to adapt to the change that is coming and has come, to be able, to sort of keep going in the face of adversity, I think there are several things we must do. I think one is we have to generally, in your business, in your own personal life, is cut costs. Right now, I tell you, we're going through global inflation, as you mentioned. We are. As Kenya, you go to the shop every week and prices are just going up. So inflation is an issue. The shilling is depreciating. Oil prices have gone up. There's a lot of uncertainty concerning how things are going to be 6 months from today, 10 months from today. And so we have to, even if you have a job, especially if you have a job, you must cut costs so that we find ways of saving money. And then we also have to look for ways of earning more, is the second thing we must do. How can I generate another income? Yes, my church is paying me. I'm a leader in my church and I have a salary. Guys, one income is too close to none. We saw that with COVID. I've spoken to so many, hundreds of people who've lost jobs wondering, what do I do? Now, if you had prepared beforehand, then it is easier. So for those of you who still have an income, find a way to earn an additional income, even if it is $5 extra in the next month, and build on that. The next thing is, how can I, number 3, optimize my expenses? Fine, I have to pay for school fees for my children. Yes, I have to pay rent for my office. Yes, I have to pay rent for my home. But how can I reduce that cost? Can I negotiate it? Can I ask for payment plans that are comfortable for me to be able to do it? Fourthly, we must build emergency funds. How much do you spend a month? Can you put some of that saving a little bit and build towards 6 months of savings that you can use should you lose your income? Should we go into another crisis? Should inflation go very high? Should elections not work out? We have to prepare for the inevitable or for the uncertainty and the unknown. I think finally we must invest. And I'll add on to what you said. We must invest, but we have to be careful to invest in things that are not very risky, especially in this season. We have great opportunities in this country, such as the treasury bonds that are issued by the government of Kenya. Offering rates are like 13% per annum, tax-free, as we're going to see shortly, tax-free. And you get all of that in your pocket, guaranteed for 20 years, for 15 years, for the length of the bond. There are great opportunities and there are many, but we must invest, and that would be my submission.
Rina, very practical, very practical. Dr. Kasambala, Rina talks about 6 months of your expenses and that build-up. You are ministered. Is that an expression of lack of faith?
Well, the Bible is very clear. Faith without works, is dead. But also, God has made us to be intelligent beings. One positive side, out of many, that COVID, has brought to the fore, is for us to rethink how we do things. And I think this is what, Rina is talking about. Where we had luxury to spend whatever we want to spend, I think we need to call to action now. That luxury is not there. It's a risk, to do that. Where we had luxury just to lean on one source of income, that luxury is not there. So I think, again, to bring hope here, it's not too late. I mean, out of these crises, some people have emerged very strong. Those who are willing to take action, to cut costs, to cut expenses, and to rechannel themselves on what is important. I think for me, Dr. Barina, is to remain focused on what matters. Because that's what I've learned from COVID. Remain focused on what matters. The question is, before you do that, does that really matter? Does that really make a difference? Why are you doing it if it doesn't make any difference? If it doesn't add any value to you, why are you getting involved? Why are you spending on that? So I think that question has to be the driving question for all of us. It could be in the financial area, it could be in the involvement in the community, in the church, whatever you do, just rethink, rework, and replan.
Sure.
I have had somebody ask me that question. Don't you think you're not, exercising faith? And I'm like, Joseph in the Bible, yes, he was directed by God, but surely he saved and put aside for 7 years, right, of lack that was going to come, 7 years. And so it's really about looking at the reality of the world that we live in. And so it is important for us to think and plan, but beyond that is also recognize that there's a God who's able to help us. I know right now we might have somebody listening who perhaps doesn't have a job, doesn't have an income, lost their source of income. And so I just wanted to also encourage you and to say that all is not lost. We must keep hope alive and know that somehow at the end of the day, God will provide a way out. And there's always a way out. And the grace of God is sufficient. It's just to lean in him, to know he's your fortress and your shelter, and some way, somehow, something will come through.
And I like that conclusion because it brings into perspective what these conversations is all about hope. That there is hope for Africa, there is hope for leadership in Africa, that there is hope for each one of us, even when we have lost hope. Dr. Kasambala, what would be your final thoughts and reflections?
For me, like I said to you, Dr. Barina and Kingston, I think this is a wonderful platform. It's just a beginning, but if we can build this kind of platform where we can talk about things that matter to us as Africans, where we don't wait for other people to create a platform for us, with due respect. We create our own platform, we wrestle with our own issues. If I talk about matatu, you understand the pressure of matatu. It's an economy on its own. If I talk about boda, you understand that, that language. But somebody outside this forum will not understand that language. So I think for me, this is a very encouraging, platform, because it's not talking about the pie in the sky. It's talking about real issues of leadership. What I would love next time, bring our political leaders here who are Christians. Bring our, the business people that you are bringing already. Bring them. Let's hear what they are wrestling with and how can we support them, in those arenas that they're involved in. This is wonderful. I really thank you for making me being part of it.
You're welcome, and indeed we'll follow up on your challenge to bring everybody on board, hoping that we won't get a brand of a particular direction, especially with our politicians. But thank you so much. One of the quotes that came to mind earlier on, especially as we think about Africa and the stories about Africa, and this quote says that until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. Now the challenge is we have the lion in Africa, but the lion has refused to learn to write its own story. So the hunter is glorified and is shown to be the biggest person who can conquer a lion. But you don't know how many hunters have died as they try to hunt the lion. I think we want to stop at that point and say, are we willing to be part of this, not just this conversation alone, but to rewrite our story? That story that has been given of a hopeless continent. We want to tell stories of courage, leaders who are doing great things, and who are changing lives. And for those who are not here yesterday at the start, I mentioned how all these conversations began. But a couple of years back, a group of men and women came together to look at leadership in Africa and asked ourselves, are Christian leaders making a difference in this continent? Why? Because every time you talk about leadership, who comes to mind? It's our politicians. It's another group of people that has come to call itself influencers. And what other name do they use? They use, yeah? What other name?
Socialites, I can hear.
Yes, all those things that they do, those are the stories that come onto our platforms. And we said, no, we need to change this story. Because they are great men and women who are doing great things in this continent. And when that study was done, 8,300 surveys that were done in 3 countries, so Kenya was one of them, representing the English-speaking countries. Central African Republic was the next, representing the Francophone or French-speaking countries. And another group was from Angola, representing countries that speak Portuguese, or we call the Lusophone. And it was amazing the kind of statistics that we received. And this is empirical data. It's available on the website to confirm that this was done thoroughly with all the academic rigor that was involved. But some of the names that featured were people that you and I may never know, but communities recognize the impact of their work in those places. I possibly could mention some of them, but time does not allow us. But that's what then started, made us to start thinking, wait a minute, we have great stories. Nobody is telling them. And if we are waiting for someone to come and tell them, they will tell us the same way. I don't know, so for some of us who went to school a bit earlier, we kept on learning in history. The first man to discover Mount Kenya was, you know the story. But yet the Kikuyus, the Merus, the Embus have always lived around that mountain forever. So were they not men and women to discover that mountain? That's the story that we'll get to hear. We need to change that history because it's not good history. And so this is what has motivated this. So I know that many of you are asking, how can you participate? I want to tell you this, that already if you go to our Facebook page, African Christian Leaders, I would encourage you to go there. Like that page, be part of the conversation. We are growing a great community there, and we are hoping to grow much more of that community. We do have the lead channel that you already have been part of, and some of you have followed the conversations there. And we are hoping that in the next couple of months, you'll find many stories there about Africans and African leaders and the work they are doing and impacting their communities. And we are extending the invitation to both of you, those who are physically present and those who are in the different spaces. That platform is you. We want to tell you stories. If you are good in careers, we want to be able to have a sub-channel that will deal with careers and lead careers. We are talking about lead faith. We are talking about all these aspects of our lives, and we have people who are telling their stories there. And we want that conversation to continue. So this was just to ignite that conversation, and you'll be hearing more from us, and we'll be telling you how you can be part of this. But we want to say we have our stories, and we want to tell those stories as Africans. So go to that page, subscribe to Lead channel, and you'll find a lot of inspiring content coming your way in the coming days. All the recordings that have been happening these last 2 days are there already, and the engagement has been live, as Dr. Kasambala said. It's been amazing seeing people from Southern Africa, Western Africa, all being part of this conversation. And lastly, there is a platform that in the works, and hopefully in the next 2-3 months, it will be all up. And we are creating a platform. I don't want to give you the equivalent of it outside there, but we are saying we want to tell our stories there. If you have written a book and you're wondering, how will people in North Africa know that I've written a book? We want to actually feature all the books that are written by Africans for Africans on that platform, free of charge, so that we expose you to the world. And not just the books alone. It's anything great that's coming out of the continent. The ministries that are doing an amazing work, we want to profile them there. There are many churches that may not even have a platform. He talked about churches that didn't have a platform. We are saying we want to be the solution. We want to be part of the solution to the Africa's problem, because Africa, and I know this has been said by others, but not in their context, I'm saying it in our own context, that we are Africans and Africa must be our business. So I want to stop there for this conversation and bring on Kingston to come and bring us to a close. And as part of bringing Kingston on stage to bring this to a close, I'll still ask my panelists to remain seated here. I'll also bring on stage our 2 other co-hosts who are here, Reverend Purity Murungi, if you can join Kingston, and Gaki Dominica. And we also have Trufosa Trufi Kwakasumba, who is not here with us. And this is just but a small team of a bigger team that's been involved in this. So as much as you may have seen a lot of Kingston and myself, we are only but representative of people who have volunteered. And by the way, all these guys are here because they have given their time and talent and resources to make this work with no pay. I appreciate them. Let's celebrate them. Over to you, Kingston.